Hi, it's Chris with Implied Music. What's the difference between key signatures and scales? Key signature, scale, scale, I get this question all the time. They're different. Okay, bear with me for a second. Joanna Newsom's a singer-songwriter, and on her maybe first or second album, there's a song, Emily. If you don't know Joanna Newsom, definitely check her. She's not for every market, but anyway, there's a song on that album, first or second album, Emily. And Emily's an astronomer, and she's explaining to Joanna the difference between a meteorite and a meteor. And the lyric goes, the meteorite is the source of the light, and the meteor is just what we see. Well, it's kind of the same type of thing when we look at the difference between scales and key signatures, and I'll show you what I mean. So you know that in Western common practice music theory, we name our notes with letters. There's 7 of them. I just played a C scale, and that was C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then the whole thing starts again. Now, as it happens, we have a little rule for all the major scales, and it's that we have to have one of every letter. You can't have 2 A's. You can't have an A flat and an A sharp. And as a result, we've come up with a way of describing these 15 major scales called key signatures. And if you look at the circle of fifths, you can see, you've probably seen all of this stuff before. And I think this is basic stuff, but let's just kind of chase it down with me, right? So as you progress from key signature to key signature around the circle of fifths, more and more notes, and then after you get to the halfway point, less and less notes, have to be altered from their original simple letter name. First, as you progress, you begin by adding sharps. Notes need to be raised a half step in order to maintain the basic formula of the major scale, which I'll remind you of in a second. And then at a certain point, notes start to fall back down again from the black keys to the white keys, or from a half step up to a half step down, back down to their easy single letter without an adornment, without a sharp or a flat name, until eventually you get back around to F. There's only one flat, and then we take it back home again to C. That's a C scale you just saw there. A G scale looks like this. I'm going to begin on G. And the difference is, in the C scale, F is natural. In the G scale, F is sharp. There's one of every letter name, but the F has to be raised a half step in order to maintain the basic formula of the major scale. And this is the thing. The key signature tells us how to change the names of things, but the scale is a formula. And the formula for the conventional major scale is start anywhere, we don't care. I'm going to start on this black note. Go up a whole step, go up a whole step. Go up a half step. Go up a whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. I just played a major scale, and it sounds like this. I used no thumbs when I did it. It's a trick that I've talked about before. But the major scale is a formula. The major scale is a formula of whole and half steps. I'm going to show you something. So I had to open up a keyboard so you can see it. So take a look at the screen if you would. So this major scale that I just played, sometimes you're playing black notes and sometimes you're playing white notes. You can see them down at the bottom. And if I hold them all down at once, you can see it rather clearly. It sounds a little dissonant. That collection of blue stuff there is the scale. it's shimmering, it's shining. It's the, as it happens, F sharp major scale. It's also, and we'll just say this, the G flat major scale. It's these in notation. That's just the key signature. It's not the scale. Don't confuse the meteor, which is what we see, for the meteorite, which is the lump of rock which plunged through your ceiling and landed on your living room floor. The scale is a thing. The key signature is an idea. Don't confuse the map for the terrain. In fact, I have an album called Terrain. And the reason for it is this. Every key signature on keyboard or on guitar or on any instrument has a specific physical layout on the instrument. If you're singing, it has a specific feeling. It's placed in your head and in your body in a certain way. Let's start someplace else and create a scale that I could describe with this formula. Whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step. Let's start on A. Whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step. Shall I hold them all down? This is a diminished scale, and it's an unusual terrain. There is no key signature which describes that. Now, what makes the terrain idea, or just the idea of a scale as a field of action, useful for us as musicians, is once we describe our terrain to ourselves, and the key signature only goes part of the way to doing that, we can then act on it in an interesting way. So I'm going to describe this terrain to myself. It went from D all the way up to the next D. And that means I can play within that terrain freely. In fact, jazz musicians and classical composers might call that modal playing. The terrain of a scale, it's really difficult to describe these kinds of things with key signatures, can change as a piece progresses. So I'm going to go from this terrain, which is the one I just used, to a different terrain completely, this one. And they would intersect if I played all the notes at once like this. That's the first terrain, and then I have to adjust all of the notes to fit. That's the next terrain. So I missed the E flat needs to be in there, sorry. I ran out of fingers, I guess, huh? So we could make a piece of music that changes between the two, can't we? Right. There's no easy way to describe that with just, say, a key signature, is there? In fact, I really, if I had to say it to somebody in key signatures, I'd say, well, the first key signature is C major, but I'm really only playing from D to D, and I'm thinking of D as my center. And then the second key signature is A flat major, but I'm really thinking of the D flat as the center, and that changes every couple of measures, and I'm kind of going between the, right? Cuckoo. Don't confuse the map for the territory. There's always something richer in the terrain of the scale than can be expressed in the shorthand of the key signature. Key signatures are an important way to describe things when you're talking to your buddies or writing a piece of music and handing it off. It keeps us from having to write in accidentals in front of every note that might be a little bit adjusted. But there's actually no reason not to do that. Many contemporary composers, among them Philip Glass, do not use key signatures in their compositions because each moment has its own terrain. Well, I hope this has been useful. Like, click the button, do all the things we do on YouTube. I'll see you next time.